What's up, guys? It's Bailey Cream from Bailey Cream Gaming. Today we're going to go over a recap of our latest session of the Game of Bones campaign. That's session number 4. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the night started out with the players waking up in a tavern. They had Raynor, who is now an orphan because his mother was murdered in the previous session. And he was asking where his mom was. Awkward. So, what the players decided, there's a lot of arguing, and they decided that it would be best to send him to his uncle, who lives over by the Iron Bank. He runs the Bounty Guild. But instead of taking him there, they decided that we would like to send him on a carriage or cart to the uncle. And before leaving the tavern, the group noticed that the wanted poster said that Aegis Valgarion was last seen by the House of Black and White. So they went to Gaiman's Travels down the road and paid some gold and basically said, okay, we're going to send you to your uncle. See ya! And they dipped out. And as the players are leaving Gaiman's Travels, they see an arrow strike the sign above them with a note attached to it. And they take the note down, and it's just written in blood that says, "Leave this town." So they're like, whoa, that's kind of creepy. So let's get out of this part of town. So they were talking about where they want to go next, and they decide that the only lead they really have is the House of Black and White to find Aegis Valgarion for 200 gold. So they cross the bridge to the Islands of the Temples. However, there's no bridge from the Temple of the Lord of Light to the House of Black and White. So they said, okay, we need to get a boat to get there. So they go back across the bridge. They go down to the boat rental place down the way, and they rent a boat and take the boat to the island of the House of Black and White and go to talk to the person there, whose name was Mager. And they asked him, "Have you seen Aegis? Have you seen Aegis Valgarion? Is there anyone here?" And he says, "No one here by that name." And they asked if he could help us at all, and he basically said he had to go and close the door, and that's all they got from that. So they're kind of confused of what to do next, and before you know it, Dorian hears the voice of the Celestial come down from him and say, "Dorian, go to the Isle of the Gods. A priest needs your help," or something to that effect. So they get back in the boat and they go to the Isle of the Gods, which is directly adjacent, and they go into the biggest temple on the island, and they see a priest there, and Dorian approaches the priest and does his little priestly signs or whatever, because Dorian's a cleric, and asks the priest, and the priest looks at him and says, "You're a man of faith, I see." And they go back and forth discussing religion, and Dorian says, "Well, have you ever heard the voice of a god speak to you, and what does that mean?" And the priest says, "Well, sometimes you have to be careful because you can hear the voice of a god, and it might be the god you're thinking of, but it could also be the voice of something else. But oftentimes you look for a sign." And right after he says that, the doors slam shut, and everyone looks back, and they see all this big group of people dressed in red robes. The one in front yells, "Kill the priest! He must be fed to the blood dragon!" And he throws a dagger, and it hits the priest right in the neck. And the priest, is dying. And the players, instead of trying to save the priest, decide, hey, let's just fight these guys off. And so they initiate combat. And so this is their biggest fight yet. They've got 6 cultists lined up at the back. Now the first one's a little bit special, but the 5 behind him are just kind of regular cultists. And so they decide to move up. Lyra pulls out her longbow. The cultist moves up. Dorian decides to move up and help Cedric. And Artemis decides to move back and shoot his crossbow. And they take one of the guys out. Another guy hides behind a pillar because he's scared and doesn't want to die. And meanwhile, they're fighting, they're missing, they're hitting, and so the main cultist does a few unusual things. First, he sends a sacred flame spell towards Artemis, and Artemis basically does a cool. He rolled a 20 on a dexterity saving throw, so he does a backflip and lands on the flame, putting it out. That's what we decided he would do. And at another point in the battle, this lead cultist is hurt by Dorian, and he only has, I mean, he's close to dying. He only has 1 health left, and he casts a hellish rebuke to Dorian. Luckily, Dorian passed the dexterity saving throw, but he still took a bit of damage from that. So Dorian took some damage, Lyra took some damage. In the end, they killed all of them. Artemis takes the arrow from earlier and stabs it into the heart of one of the cultists to send them a message. So after the battle, the players are rummaging through. They're finding some loot. So they find, they each had some scimitars, they had some daggers, and one of them had a necklace, a gold necklace with a bunch of glowing red jewels in it. So the jewels were glowing, guys. And they also find a ring with a red gemstone that's not glowing. And they all seem to have the same tattoo of a dragon eating its own tail. And as they're looting these corpses, a family walks in and says, "Oh my god, look at all these dead people!" Ah! And they run out of there. So then everyone's like, "Oh shit, we gotta get out of here." So they grab all their loot and run out the building, saying like, "What happened? Let's get to the boat." So they go to the boat and they're rowing away. And as they're rowing away, they look back at the island and they see one of the women who saw them looting the corpses, and she's talking to a guard, and she points at the boat, and they're like, "Uh-oh." So they start rowing faster, and as they're making their way back to the shore, Cedric asks Dorian, "Hey, do you know what that symbol meant with the dragon eating its own tail?" Dorian does a history check and says, "Yeah, you know what? That is a symbol of the Red Scourge." And he also does a religion check, and because he's a cleric, he knows stuff about religions and whatnot, and says they believe in a spiritual blood dragon that they must feed by blood sacrifice. They take the boat and they get it back to shore, and they're bruised and bloodied, and they had just had a big fight, so they go back to the tavern. Cedric orders a steak and potatoes. Artemis says, "Give me 3 orders of steak and potatoes." Lyra is kind of cheap, so she has the dinner salad, and then Dorian gets the chicken strips, french fries, and some dark brown stout. Everyone else had water. Dorian got pretty much drunk off the dark brown stout, and they had a good time eating and drinking, and decided to go to bed, and that pretty much sums it up for the night. So thanks for watching. We'll be back next week, Wednesday, May 27th at 7 p.m. for the next Game of Bones session number 5. This has been Bailey Cream Gaming. Have a wonderful gaming week.